and other places, I have found, automation has been a big word over the last 30, 40 years. And time and again, I have found, even though technology has progressed, tools have progressed, we have found the success of this to be limited. So today we're going to talk about that and see what things make projects to fail, and how, from our past experiences, my esteemed panel that is here, and our experiences, how we can help ascertain the success of automation, QA automation, which I think is very, very important. So with that, let me first start with an introduction. Myself, I'm CEO of ThinkSys, a software services company. I've been in the software industry for 38, 39 years, starting, way back, obviously, and have been involved in software development, software in IT, in technology for that many years, and QA has been a big part of me as I have grown, and as part of our company, which is how we grew. So with that, I'm going to pass you to Madhu, who's Madhu Jain, and no relative of mine, but I met her recently, and I've been very impressed with the work. So Madhu, do you want to do a quick introduction?
Absolutely. Hi, everybody. And thank you, Rajiv, for the warm introduction. Yes, we are not related, but seems like we've known each other for a really long time because we work in the same area. So I'm the Director of Technology and Data Engineering at Freshtracks Canada. It's a #1 luxury travel company in Canada, and we use tech and data internally to actually accelerate the pace of travel for our customers. I've been in software development for about 17 plus years, worked for SaaS, non-SaaS companies, worked at Electronic Arts, MathWorks, where I've led the quality operations from ground up, and also built the software engineering teams to scale up their production deployments.
Excellent. And, Madhu has built teams with 0 production bugs. So she has the design control and has the ability to release software with 0 production bugs. And that's not an easy feat, as all of you who are sitting here know. Let me pass to Jake. Jake, I met recently, and has been a QA automation engineer, and has been extremely impressive in what he has done. But I'll let Jake introduce himself to start.
Hello. So yes, I'm Jake. I've been in technology for as long as I can remember, but for QA automation for the past 5 to 7 years or so. Leading migrations, all sorts of fun kind of projects along those lines, hitting every obstacle that you can along the way with QA automation, I'm sure that we're all familiar with. I have a solid background in customer service. I've worked at Apple, I've worked at Electronic Arts, a lot of these major companies doing tech support, doing QA for them, and then also moving into this automation side of things. So I'm happy to talk about the generalities that we all run into whenever we are trying to automate anything.
Excellent. And, Jake, when I was learning more about him, over the last 10, 12 years, he has helped companies reach 60, 70% automation. And people who are on this here today and are working in automation, they know that having 60 to 70% automation in multiple companies and making that happen is not an easy task. So I'm really excited to have Jake here and share with us his feedback on all the things. So with that, I'm going to start with the first slide, which I thought probably is what I wanted everybody to get a sense of where QA automation is today, right? Now, 77% of the companies who are in software have adopted some form of QA automation. Now, the interesting thing that of the 77% that have adopted automation, only 40% of them continue to use automation. That means 60% of the companies who have adopted automation don't necessarily regularly use automation or have dropped from them using automation. Only 5% of the companies, 5% of the companies engage in full automation testing. And what full automation doesn't mean that they are 100% automated. That just means that they are regularly, or having a large portion of automation being done. 2/3 of the companies who use software and automation have a 75-25 ratio of manual and QA. That means 75% of the QA work is still manual, and only 25% of the work is automation. So 66%, 2/3 of the companies are doing that. 90% have less than 40% automation, and only 20%, about 20% of the companies use the QA automation tools effectively, and these are both paid tools and open source tools. When companies start using QA automation, a lot of the companies focus on ROI. Like, I got to get my return on investment because there's an investment to do that. The good news here is that 25% of the companies, or at least you can say 50% of the companies, found the ROI in 12 months, right? So any company that are using QA automation, this is an excellent news on QA automation and why QA automation should be used, because the companies who start using automation, they find an ROI very, very quickly. Now, what ROI is, we will talk a little bit about in the upcoming slides, because ROI could be very different for every company that is using automation. Now, we'll talk today about Gen AI as well. And so, one of the things that we will talk today is about Gen AI. And 40% of the corporations have started to experiment in Gen AI. Now, this is in the QA organization. That doesn't mean that the 40% doesn't imply, people who are experimenting in development and other areas. But in QA, 40% of the corporations are experimenting with Gen AI. And we'll talk about Gen AI today. I'm assuming a lot of you guys are exploring or using some form of Gen AI in your day-to-day roles, both for QA aspect of it and also on your personal communication aspect of it. Now, the last metric that I think is the most important metrics that I have found, and I had this slide or this metric almost 15 years ago when I first talked about QA automation. And this percentage, which is 64% of the time, automation or QA automation fails to deliver expected results. And the expected results is from from your senior executives, from your main management who invest in stuff. 64 over the time fail on expected results. And there are multiple reasons why it happens, and we will try to cover some or all of these aspects of it. So with that, I'm going to go into the first aspects of what are the things that are necessary for QA automation to be successful, and then what are the pitfalls of that. So the reason one that automation fails is a lot about goals, plans, and strategy. And with that, I'm going to first bring in Madhu and have her share thoughts on how does she feel this is an important part of what the companies, organizations should do for them to be successful.
Yeah, thank you, Rajiv. Thank you for presenting those metrics. Very, very important for us to understand the state of automation in the current industry. So when it comes to goals, plans, and strategy, I always like to start with when you are planning to fail, when you're failing to plan, you're planning to fail. That means you need to have a full fail-proof plan in place when you embark on automation. So when you're talking about goals, plans, and strategy in automation, you have to think about, do you have the right resources? Why are you even doing it? What is your current production bug count? What is the expected ROI? What exactly you want out of this? Do you have the buy-in? Do you have the budget? There's so many factors that go into place when you actually start a new project, and automation is in the same bucket. And when you're not thinking about all this, this is the first step of failure into automation.
Great. And a lot of times when I talk to companies, and when we talk to companies who are coming to us for help, code quality is a big part. Jake, do you have some thoughts upon code coverage is a big part, and then also they feel that automation will help in production quality. How do you feel about that, Jake? And what do you have thoughts on that?
It absolutely can. I think that it all really comes into your strategy, as we've been discussing here. If your goal is code quality, then you can absolutely achieve that. If your goal is a reduction in regression time, you can absolutely achieve that. If your goal is no bugs in production, you can absolutely achieve that. But you have to go in with an idea on what you want to accomplish. For code quality, you can use automation tools, whether it's unit tests, whether it's API tests, all sorts of different kind of avenues that you can try to hit that at, so that you can make sure that your code is good before it ever hits production servers. But it really, you need to plan for that. You need to know that that's what you're going into. That's where you're focusing your resources. That's what your first milestone is. If you're setting up some sort of a plan or roadmap or something along those lines, you really need to focus. If your goal is UI automation, then maybe you don't care about code quality because all you care about is the front end. And so it really all comes back to strategy. What do you hope to achieve with automation? What areas do you think automation would benefit you? Where would it save you time? Would it save you money? Would it give you better quality? All of these thoughts and questions come into this overall this overall aspect of what are you looking to achieve. I think it all comes back to that.
Awesome. And Madhu, you have been a big proponent of having a higher code coverage from your all QA strategy. Do you guide companies or teams to say what type of code coverage should be the goal if you do with automation, maybe with even manual testing? But how does automation help in that goals, and should they have targeted goals for that? Because I've heard companies talk about 100% code coverage, which I've always told them that is not a great goal because it will always fail. And so how do you guide out? How would you guide the people here in terms of putting code coverage as a goal or not goal?
Right. So whenever there's a new feature in production, you're working on it, it starts with a requirements phase. As soon as you have the requirements, you should target for 100% code coverage through your manual testing. And that code coverage means your functional test coverage. And when it comes to setting code coverage goals for the automation, I always start small. If it's a big, hairy target, you're signing up for failure right up front. So you would have to start small. You need to have a code coverage measuring tools. Once that in place, you start with a small target, say 30% and 40%. And over time, you increase it to, if you can even reach 80%, I think it's a really nice achievable target. But signing up for 100% is a failure. There are so many corner cases you cannot possibly automate. Even if you can, you don't have the enough ROI. For example, you could spend 2-3 weeks in automating something that the test case is executed for 2 minutes every 6 months. So you don't want to spend that kind of ROI and company resources in automating test cases, and especially the test cases that are flaky, that are bound to break every production deployment, and you're just spending time in maintaining it. So that decreases your code coverage right there through automation. So you have to be careful in picking up the target and make your team successful in reaching that. So slowly over time, work for a company that had 50% code coverage, company-wide goal, and that increased 5% every quarter until they reached 75%. After that, it was up to the discretion of the team to increase it.
Fantastic. One other question, and I'm going to ask Madhu that, Jake, next I'll bring you in. But when I talked about strategy to the companies, I always talk about that there has to be a buy-in of QA automation all the way from top down, right? Which means all the executives have to be bought in, because QA automation is an investment, right? You and both Jake talked about the budgeted dollars, where you got to put money into QA automation for it to be successful. And so the buy-in has to be there. But you also talked about the buy-in from the development, for the developers aspect of it, that developers should believe in QA automation. Do you want to talk like a few minutes on that, or just a quick insight? Hello? Did I lose you guys?
No.
Okay, sorry.
Hey, Jake.
I think Jake's muted.
Oh,
Oh, I didn't know you were waiting for me. I thought you were waiting for
oh, so
Madhu.
Madhu had a good thought on what, like, how do you get developers should be involved as well. So that's kind of where I wanted to be. Madhu?
Oh, it was my okay. Yes.
Yeah,
So
sorry.
it was question for Jake. I'm so sorry. Yes,
Either.
you absolutely need a buy-in, right? So buy-in starts at many levels. So executive buy-in, of course, that's a role of a leader to present the ROI you're gonna get from the automation. But the most important buy-in is for the developer, because ultimately you want everybody to run that automated suite, especially in your lowest environment, which is your either sandbox or your local or dev environment, in which the automated tests, which are not flaky, robust, and can be executed in parallel in a supersonic speed, that is where you need your biggest buy-in. And you get that from the developer who can participate in writing the test cases, using those test cases in finding the issues in their PR before it even reaches to the QA environment. So that's the number one buy-in. And after that, yes, executive buy-in. You want your DevOps team to be on board as well to help you out writing those code pipelines. And you also need buy-in from your QA manual team, who would ultimately start supporting the automation team as well, so that they start executing those test cases when they are doing end-to-end regression. So buy-in needs to happen. For me, number one, buy-in should be from the developers.
Excellent. Jake, do you want to add anything to that? Sorry, my mess on how I invited people. So.
Yeah, absolutely. Developer buy-in is huge. Obviously, the executives and folks along those lines, they hold the purse strings. They're the ones that'll cut the checks for whoever, to get the budget where it needs to be. But the developers, as a QA automation engineer, you're working with developers constantly. You want the developers to be bought into QA automation, not only so that they can help you, but also so that they can start thinking about how they're developing the actual code that they're using for the application for the project, so that they can think about automation and make it easier on you. We've all of us that have had a hand in automation know how annoying updating locators can be. If developer buy-in means that instead of going for super long full XPaths, that we can use a test ID, a test data ID. We can throw little hooks in here or there all over the application or project or what have you. It makes your life as a QA automation engineer easier. It makes devs' life easier because your tests then pick up issues that may occur whenever they're running locally. And so you really need developers on your side. They're part of your team. They are absolutely there to help you push and keep growing. Because without the developers' help or buy-in, QAs, you're kind of dead in the water. You can do all these fun things, but it ultimately doesn't matter if devs are constantly changing, locators or items or not communicating or not thought about how do I run this? What's a better way to do this? Oh, I saw this test did something weird. The back end does this, and so having that feedback is very important on that developer level.
Excellent. So, so I think if I were to summarize everything that you guys said, it would be, you got to have goals, plans, and strategy. You got to have proper buy-ins. You should not have very hairy goals to set that up. Have smaller goals, targeted goals that you achieve quarter by quarter and get to a point where, whether it is code coverage, higher quality, all of those things are bought in. So there are all these questions. And by the way, anybody who needs these slides, I'm happy to send them. And I think I forgot to mention, but this is being video recorded and we will be sharing this on YouTube. So you guys can have access to this, all the insights that you're getting on it. So the first reason why fails is that a lot of times companies don't set up their goals, don't set up their plans, don't set up a strategy. And somebody just says, I got to do QA automation. And they start QA automation and that leads to failure. A lot of you may have heard about this inverted triangle of automation, but this is a big part of why a lot of times automation fails. And I'm going to put this up here and then invite Jake and Madhu to guide on this. A lot of times, because of the way manual testing is done, the testing happens at the GUI level. And, one of the things that what automation always says is just automate whatever the manual testers are doing. And so you will see that a lot of the tools are record and play and all the stuff. And that's where a lot of the automation starts. While I believe, and we have seen this success after success, that it is the increased ROI is in the inverted triangle. That means you got to do the automation at the unit test level, at the integration and API test level, and the GUIs have to be at a less level. With that, I'm going to invite Jake. First Madhu, and Madhu, what are your thoughts on this? How do you guide the companies? Because I think this is where a lot of times we spend a lot of time on the upper and then on the down.
That is absolutely correct. And I love this slide because, when you are a newbie in the team, you just think about, hey, let me just automate the front end, and which is great. But at the same time, you have to look at the deeper level testing. And that's why this inverted triangle plays a really important role. The example I would like to give is like service-oriented architecture. When you have SOA-based architecture, you have a client layer all the way to the database layer. There are about 5 to 6 layers in any SaaS program. And if you're just testing the client layer, you're missing out on the deep-rooted bugs, which will eventually make it to the client layer and might not get caught by your front layer protection, which is your automated test suite. So yes, GUI testing is important because you're using the product as the customer would do, but you have to protect the bugs going to the GUI layer by adding the layer of automation, which is through unit test, your integration test, your functional API database. All that testing needs to be done at the bottommost layer so that your GUI tests are doing the job as if your customers are using the product and not catching the real deep-rooted issues. So whenever I guide the team, I always kick off the projects in parallel when there is no automation. My front-end lead starts writing the unit test. My backend lead starts writing the API test and also add all sorts of monitoring. There's New Relic, the really wonderful tools out there which can guide us in adding another monitoring. And then there is an expert automation team who are always writing the test end to end as if our customer are using that product. And that's the combination of it which will make the ultimate automation project successful. And you say 30%, I would say even 20% GUIs test is towards GUI, and rest of them is actually on the development team to write the good, solid testing layers.
Excellent. Jake.
Yeah, right. As Madhu said, that you can catch most issues, most bugs early because it's a problem with the calculation. It's an algorithm. It's the database value wasn't set correctly. It's something along those lines because by the time you get to the GUI to the front end layer, it's just a window into the database. That's all GUIs are, is just a window into data so that we can interpret it, use the application, what have you. And so if you're able to catch a lot of those underlying issues early, you don't see a lot of the front end issues. At most, you're dealing with misaligned elements, things along those lines that are more user experience, not necessarily actual core issues that are wrong with the code stack that you have. I would also say that this also kind of points back to what I said about what we were talking about with planning and with developer buy-in. I have found that your automation projects, automation initiatives are more successful when you have developers writing unit tests the same time you're writing automation tests. Now, whether those automation tests are API or front end, I'm kind of thinking that it's separate as developers are handling the unit test, the back end, they're bought in, they're making sure that all their code is good to go. You have your automation test, your API test in between. So by the time it ever goes to a front end for a manual tester, it's been hit from 3, 4, 5 different angles, alerts, all those types of things. And so it's very important to know that the foundation is strong. And that's what this slide is pointing to in the inverted triangle, is that the foundation needs to be strong. Otherwise, your front end, your GUI tests, they don't really matter because you're saying 2 plus 2 doesn't equal 4 in your code base, and that's a bigger issue than, oh, well, it's not displaying correctly on the UI. And so you can catch a lot of these problems quicker, earlier, before they even hit QA's hands. They can be addressed and fixed.
Excellent. So I'm going to go to the next reason. So reason number two is that a lot of times we focus on the wrong test cases, on the wrong area. We assume manual testing equal to automation test and just convert the manual test to automation. That is not necessarily the case. You can get a lot more successes if you invert the triangle of your QA automation. And yes, the developers are get involved, and so it's a different thought process, and we'll talk about a little bit more on some of these things. Now we could talk about, going into this, the skills and the tools required for QA automation. Over the years, right, there are so many tools that have come in, from all the way from record to play to no code QA automation, and the skills required, and a lot of companies that I talk to, when they start or think about a QA automation, and I'm not saying this is wrong, I'm not saying necessarily this is wrong, but a lot of companies first start by QA automation. They have a manual automation team, and they say, hey, can you do QA? Can you do automation? That's my QA team. How do you guys feel into that? I'll start with Jake here and then go to Madhu.
Well, not every manual QA team member can be an automation team member, and it is what it is, I guess, as you'd say. It really, the QA automation is a very interesting kind of corner of the industry that we're in that it has a lot of aspects from a lot of different roles. Not only do you need to know how to manual test something as an automation engineer, you need to know code, you need to be able to read code, you need to be able to write code, you need to understand, tech stacks and different languages and all those fun things that go on. You also need to know how is your tech stack even set up? Are you using Azure? Are you using AWS? Where is things hosted? Is it GitHub? Is it whatever it is? All the different kind of places for repos and all that. Where can we integrate our CI/CD? Because you don't want if you're automating all this, you don't want someone manually clicking a button to run the automation. That's why we're automating, right? Automate the automations. And so you need to have an understanding of the overall life cycle of your product, the tech stack. And so just trying to force someone that's a great manual tester into an automation role doesn't always make sense. They really need to have kind of a jack of all trades. They need to know a lot of different avenues and aspects, and still at the end of the day be able to think like a customer. How am I using this product? How can I set up these test steps, test cases, these automation suites that make sense, that provide us a valuable return?
Excellent. Madhu?
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, Jake, you hit all the points really well. Definitely. So yeah, manual QA teams are great. We take inspiration from them every single day because they bring that QA mindset on how to break the product. Now, my golden, sweet spot is when you get the QA mindset along with the software development skills, because the software developer would know, again, how to set up the repo, how to have the structure of the test, where they use the page object model, object orientation, the way the helper files are set up, and of course, like dive into more CI/CD, where to introduce those tests, and even how to convince the developers and write automation-friendly code so that they can develop faster. So it's the magic combination of a QA mindset along with software development skills. I've seen QA manual testers become excellent coders as well over time because they have taken an extra step to go back to their school or taken courses or learn from the experts and also practice a lot. So I have seen them, and I've even seen them becoming a good developers through automation. So it's a career path they have chosen. So overall, you need a combination of a whole bunch of skills to be a good automation developer, along with ability to persuade your peers and take them along and train QA manual testing team, because QA manuals testers are writing the good test cases, the edge cases, the negative test cases, the boundary test cases, which can be an inspiration for the automation developer.
And what about the role or the in today's world where DevOps is becoming such an important part of the whole software development lifecycle? How do you see the role of a QA automation engineer in their knowledge about DevOps and the CI/CD pipeline, Madhu?
Yeah. I always believe in cutting the middleman out. So if you have a DevOps team and you're relying on them, then you're just creating another dependency. So I always ask my automation team to get expertise in the code pipelines, because this way you can develop faster, you can experiment faster, you can write your pipelines faster, and you can put them in any environment you want without having to go back to or creating tickets for your DevOps team. So for me, it goes hand in hand. A QA automation developer over time should also learn the DevOps skill, get familiar with different tools, Jenkins, AWS Code Pipeline, GitHub Actions. There are so many amazing tools out there which can help them in elevate their skills and develop the automation even faster because they can run those tests. So for me, it's a must-have in an automation developer to have some familiarity with DevOps.
Excellent. What about the tools, right? And I'm going to put this on. What about the tools, right? So I've been in a lot of companies where just have a QA engineer pick a tool, and then the QA engineer leaves, and then we have come in as a services company and said that that's the wrong tool that you picked. And sometimes they're paid $250,000 for the tool. How do you guide people on which tool to pick?
So for me, I usually tell them start with the open source tool. Because if you start investing heavily in the license fees and you haven't even proven that automation is a good strategy for your production, which usually is, but do not invest in the tool financially until you have built your POCs all the way and you're getting some ROI out of it. So that's my number one rule. I don't like to pay for expert tools out there. I would like to start with the open source. For that, Selenium Python, Selenium Java, Playwright JavaScript, even Cypress, these are excellent tools to get into and start your automation. And second, do not get married to the tool. Your tech stack could change over time. You're working on Ruby on Rails right now, and then there is a need to transfer to Python, Django. You just don't want to get stuck with, BDD, Cucumber, Ruby, testing that could be your personal choice for Ruby on Rails, testing that stack. And then now you switch to another code base has been completely switched, but you're still married to that Cucumber Ruby framework. So always be flexible, and that's why a good automation developer would have experience over all these tools, and they can quickly switch and see what's important. So you spend 5 years building your beautiful Selenium Python automation test framework, and all of a sudden you realize that there are too many flaky tests. The open source community is not that active, but Playwright is so hot right now in JavaScript, and I personally switched to Playwright JavaScript because it is fast. It is taking care of all the issues that I had with Selenium. And the community is so fast in suggesting what are the new changes and also developing much faster. So do not get married to tool. Always start with open source and then have the agility to switch to something else if your tech stack changes or something that has more ROI.
Jake, you've gone through many companies, and obviously the industry has changed over the last years, right? I mean, in the last 15 years, the QA automation engineer things have changed. I mean, all the way from only paid tools to record and play, to then Selenium, then frameworks on top of Selenium, now Playwright, and then there's this browser stack and tons and tons of other tools. Have you seen paid tools that really bring a lot of value and are very, very effective? Or how do you see between open source versus paid tool, even not just for kicking it off or starting, but in the long run?
I prefer open source tools, and the main reason is documentation and community. I think that these are really undersold values when you're looking at any kind of language or tool or what have you. The main open source tools, we have Selenium, we have Playwright. They've been so widely used and adapted, and there's been so many people that have gone through the struggle that you're going to go through with this particular weird avenue of aspect of I'm in 4 different iframes and I got to get to this one thing. Someone else has had that problem with these open tools, and so there's the forums, the communities. There's tons and tons and tons of information out there for the open source products that you can really overcome a lot of the fancy paid features that paid tools can provide, and it's free. And because they're open source and they have all that documentation, all the community, it's a lot easier to hop between them. I'm going through a migration from Selenium to Playwright TypeScript right now, and thankfully there's enough documentation on the Selenium side. There's enough documentation on the Playwright side. We know what we need to do to make this migration happen, so that ultimately we have less flaky tests. If we were locked into a paid tool, maybe their support page only has so much info, and so I'm reaching out to the support, and then I wait a few days for their support team member. It goes into that whole rigmarole of what are you getting out of the paid tool? And I think that open source tools with the community it's so powerful, and there's such a deep wealth of knowledge that someone else has gone through something similar enough that you will find a solution that I would say 99% of the time, open source tools are better than paid tools.
Excellent. Thank you so much for this. So, summary is that your QA automation engineers have to have the skills of a QA, a developer, and also have the ability to do DevOps. And, this is a phrase I kind of got from somewhere, which I'll say, that a QA automation engineer is a developer to the QA team, but a QA engineer to the dev team. And, there's this term, the software developer engineer in test. So you are a developer engineer, but in test, and that's what you should be. And in terms of tools, it seems like open source is the go. I think the big thing that, and I don't know if there's a question here, but what I see is when I read the Gartner reports and all of these other reports, they focus on paid tools, and maybe that's the business model, but they don't really talk about the open source tools, because especially with the Gen AI coming up, and we will talk about this in the next two slides or 2 slides out, that is going to be an important part of how and where this will end, because the open source, the paid tools are obviously putting some Gen AI in a lot of these things, though we haven't found that as effective. But the open source tools, I think the community is going to add those things over time, but it might be a little slower, but we'll see. The last item on this before we get into the Gen AI is script maintenance. One of the biggest reasons why companies in over the 13, 14 years of us as a company and in my past, the areas where we have failed, where companies have failed to be successful in QA automation, is not having proper script maintenance. And I am a firm believer that, a lot of times it's not budgeted, a lot of times it's not focused. Madhu, what are your thoughts on this? And I'll put this out and see, what do you feel about script maintenance? How do you think about it? And what do you guide the companies and the people listening to it?
Absolutely. So I usually tell my teams, you are chained to the code that you write. So more code you write, heavier that chain, the ball that is attached to you is going to be, and it's going to move you slower. So more code to write, more code to maintain. I've never seen a code that you wrote it 10 years ago and just working, especially in the world of automation, because your front end, your back end, your API, everything is changing fast. More developers you add, more code is going to change. And it's likely that next sprint, your automation needs some maintenance. So a lot of companies, they just think that, hey, let's do one-time investment, have the automation test suite, which is constantly going to run and catch bugs. That's not the case. It is an ongoing journey. As long as you have developers writing the code, you need automation engineers to maintain the automation code and keep it updated. Not to the point that, oh, it's not flaky anymore, but also continuously add test cases that are found by customers, the edge cases that are found by customers, and also to accommodate new and the latest, test inputs. So we talk about Gen AI, but it's advancing us to come up with more and more creative testing and test cases. So you're chained to that code. You would always have to maintain it as long as the developers are writing the code in the backend.
And Jake, how do you guide companies to budget it? Because a lot of times the organizations, right, at the executive level say, oh, it is automated. Why do I need to put more money in it? right? And there is this, for software development also, a lot of times, tech debt is very hard to argue and say that you got to put money in for tech debt, to removing tech debt. But in QA automation, I have time and again, it is an uphill battle to fight for budgets. I mean, how do you guide companies or people to say, this is an important part and critical?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, you mentioned tech debt, and obviously, depending on where you're at in the company, they care about tech debt more than others. But the easiest avenue I've found is to phrase it as tech debt. To phrase it as, this is you have your regular developer team. You have your developers. This is a regular developer. This entire sprint is dedicated to tech debt. And that's kind of the simplest way I've been able to push it to product teams, management teams, leadership, stakeholders, all that, is that ultimately you need one person there to make sure that all the stuff we did last week didn't break what we already had. And this is constant. This doesn't go away. Next sprint, guess what? We have one person there to address the tech debt for QA automation. And it's not so tech debt in the sense that it's 10-year-old code that we need to get, but it's, maybe we updated these locators. Maybe the script is just broken completely, but you need someone there reviewing, checking, running the scripts, checking the reports from the scripts that are run. And you ultimately need a dedicated person there. And companies, whenever I've stepped into an atmosphere where we want automation, 9 times out of 10, there is automation. It's 3 years old. It's half built. There are tests with comments that says to do later. Once this feature's done, there's all this, and there's a whole history. You could the whole lifetime of reading these old notes in the code of you obviously cared, but you didn't care enough to keep someone there to keep building it for the past 3 years. And so now we're having to pick it up, and who knows what state we're in, because what have you changed in the last 3 years? We might as well throw this whole suite out and start over, because we don't know where we're at. And I think that you need to be able to convince and convey that this person is there to facilitate the life of the automation. Without this person there to feed and water and prune and trim and pull the fruit, all that, they're the gardener to make sure that the automation suite grows. Otherwise, it gets old, it dies, and you end up throwing it out and having to start over. And it's a bigger investment. And so it's that idea of, do you want to replace it now and maintain it for a small price, or do you want to keep restarting every 2 years and investing time and money and effort and then do it again 2 years later? And so maintenance is huge. You need to be able to find a way, whatever is important to is it the money, the restart cost? Is it the time sink? Is it the tech debt? What is the avenue in that you have, so that you can say, hey, we need someone here to maintain this and work on this daily. Otherwise, we're going to get really far behind.
And one of the excellent thoughts, both Madhu and Jake. And I think what I have found, we talked about the skills, and we talked about manual testers getting to QA, learning QA automation with the right skills. In the old days, and it's just dating myself, there used to be, when there was no 2-week releases, and the releases were in a year's times, software releases were on a year's times on floppy disk. There used to be a maintenance team that used to, fix the bugs and so on and so forth on a regular basis. And that team were, junior developers who were coming up to speed, learning from the senior developers, and they were just doing bug fixing. What I have found many a times that, adding manual testers to have that path, fix the code and, maintain the code for script maintenance has been very effective in some of the cases that I've been here, where manual testers start to move from manual testing to QA automation, then move to even better skills and moving into development, another thing, depending upon the person. So the summary of this, and I know that we might run out of time, so I want to stop this conversation here, and we can talk a lot about, is that needing a plan for script maintenance is critical, right? And if you don't do that, there is a 90% chance you will fail, because either the script fails because the features have changed, or because the technology has changed, or for any reason. And once the output of the automation is not something that you can trust, because you will say, oh, it failed because it has to fail because the function has changed. And once that happens, then the automation itself has got very little meaning. So make sure that there is budget for that. So now let's talk about Gen AI. And I put that into two buckets, right? There is a lot of buzzword about Gen AI. There's a lot of buzzword in QAQ automation. All the big advisory companies have put on where QA automation and Gen AI is, and it falls into this first category of on the left side, where my team, and I know both Jake, you and Madhu, have spent a lot of time looking at what is available, and most of them are in paid tools, but we have looked at, and some of them I have listed over here, and none of them we feel have bring what we think Gen AI potentially can. And so I put them in the early stages. And there are a lot of things that I write here on the left side, where where this could go could be, it could generate test cases by natural language, manual to automated test generation, self-healing test scripts, some of which we have already started to do by our own work, prioritization, defect prediction. These are all the areas where Gen AI, we think, will have an impact in the upcoming days. But at least from my perspective, I find this to be in a very early stages. Madhu and Jake, starting with Madhu. Madhu, your thoughts on where do you think they are? And then I go to the left side, where I think all of us are trying to figure out how we can using Gen AI, become productive in QA automation. But let's go on the left side first, Madhu.
Yeah, you're right. Like anybody else in the world, we are hopping on the Gen AI train, and we all are constantly trying new tools out there, starting with Copilot, Cursor, and then moving on to specific test automation tools. They are called, Gen AI experts. Yes, analysis is that we are very early in that stage. Can we rely 100% on a Gen AI tool to replace an automation developer? No, we're not there yet. We cannot write scripts automatically using Gen AI tools and have it, just feed our software and have it develop the front end test. It can't even find the locators. It cannot come back and find those iframes and write a code for it, because it's not advanced yet. So that's where Gen AI is failing, in which, it's not able to take the software or gobble the software and spit out the script that will write the test case as if customer was using the product. All the tools that I have experimented with failed miserably in that area. So it might change in the future, but we're not there yet. So that has been my experience. But I use it every day for code completion, for helping with helper functions, helping me organize my test cases and write, doing automated PR reviews, but not to a point that it will generate automated test scripts for me.
Jake?
Yeah, just to ditto what was just said, it's not going to write your scripts for you right now. It can help you write them. It'll do the helper functions. It'll, the cursor predicted the Copilot predictor text is great. I love it in VS Code. It makes my life very easy. I don't have to sit here and type the same thing 100 times, or it knows what I want to do when I'm writing something, which is great. It helps me save time. It can help you organize your thoughts. If you have a decent story, and it's all reliant on the user story itself, but if you have a really good fleshed out user story and feature, you can feed that into an AI, and it'll give you a 75% approximation of what tests should be done, manual tests, and then you can adapt that. But it's not 100% even there. You still need someone in. I think we may ultimately always need someone in a chair in front of the application, in front of the program, the product itself, because computers aren't people. People do crazy things. I'm sure we've all had the funny experience of why did the customer do that? That doesn't make it logically. That makes no sense. How did they get there? Why is it a bug? Well, they made their way there. And I don't think AI is ever going to have that kind of edge that us humans have to like to break things. But it's not going to write your code for you. It can write other tools for you. I've recently used AI, the vibe coding. I'm having fun. I've been playing around with it. I was using Claude 3.7 to help me write a Python application that helps me prioritize manual tests for automation. And so I have a huge backlog of 3,000 something regression tests I need to automate. How do I go through? How do I manage all that? Well, I can use AI to help me write functions or ideas or organize thoughts or make plans. It's a helper. It is not the actual role. It doesn't fill the role, but it can fill some holes to make your life easier and faster. But we're not at 100% completion, like we've mentioned.
And I think that I think both of you are saying the same things, that some of the tools and other things, and my team has invested a lot in looking at a lot of these things, and they found that even some of these tools that claim to do pretty automated Gen AI produce a lot of fake tests and tests that are repetitive, and sometimes maintenance is harder than you may save 20%, but then you're spending 40% in maintaining them. So there's a lot more work in that, and so we see that. But our teams, and I can see my team being really, really productive and increasing the speed of QA automation by all the things that you've mentioned. All you see, GitHub Copilot, Cursor, Zero Step for test script generation, creating more edge cases. I mean, like even for helping creating edge cases, test cases. And then Madhu, you mentioned about the development in the DevOps pipeline, right? How do you integrating that and using Gen AI for that has been very productive, correct?
That is absolutely correct, right? You have your pipeline. You want to try it out. Why not use a Lambda function? And Gen AI can just convert that into Lambda function. I don't have to worry about it. And then you just have to schedule it using Cloud Event. You can run your test that way. So it has really simplified the end-to-end workflow, that you don't have to write these heavy pipelines. You can take shortcuts, have Gen AI spit out that code for you, plug it in, and then have AWS do your job.
Excellent. And so and I know we just got 5 minutes left, and at least a couple of minutes for questions, but I want to let the people who are listening know that this is early stages. I think we will probably do a session just on Gen AI and talk about all the things that people are doing to increase their QA automation and productivity. But the idea here is that all of us should monitor and see what is going on in this space today. All right, with that, I'm just going to summarize, go to our learnings today. One, set clear goals and plans and strategy. Remember the inverted triangle, so you know where you focus on ROI, high ROI, unit integration. Skills and tools are very, very important, right? Tools are interchangeable. As Madhu and Jake said, don't get married to a tool. Make sure that the skills that you have can help you pick the tool that may change as technology changes and still be successful. Script maintenance is critical. You got to plan for it. You got to budget for it, right? How do you do that? That is the most important part. If you don't do this, if you don't do any of these things, a lot of what I said, if you do script maintenance, the chances of your success are high. And then continue to monitor the Gen AI advancements. With that, I'm going to spend a couple minutes, open it for questions. I know we have our team monitoring the questions. I don't know if there are any questions there, but Jenny and Neil, if there are questions, can you pop them here?
Yeah, sure. So one of the questions we have here, and it looks like they kept themselves anonymous, is we have 1,200 plus test cases that need to be automated. How do we get going and get a head start on this?
Jake, Madhu, sorry, go ahead.
I can take that one. So in my current company, we have 8,000 test cases with zero automation. So actually, Rajiv's team is helping me out there. The way we got a head start on that, we prioritize it heavily. What are some of the end-to-end test cases that are 80% of the workflows being executed by our customer and that are production critical? So we've ranked them. So first exercise was prioritizing them, which are critical test cases. Then we move to highest, medium, and low. So we are focusing on automating the critical test cases that are 80% workflows executed by our customers, and that are the most critical business revenue related areas. So that's a head start we got there. Once we had a success in that, then we can move on to our highest and then medium and low. So that's how I've organized, is to picking out their most critical test case.
Jake? Did we lose Jake?
I think Jake's connection might have gotten interrupted, so I'm sure
No
hop
worries.
back.
No worries. No worries. So I'll add to what Madhu is saying. Yes, prioritization is important. Sometimes, and by the way, this is something that comes to us a lot, Madhu. We have at least 3 customers or 4 customers that we are working today, and a lot of times what we tell them is it is about the budget, right? So it is also about the budget, right? So if you have the money, you can get a head start for 6 months very quickly, like 3 to 4 months. You can do a good number of test cases, and that gives you a head start. And you still have to prioritize. You always have to prioritize because the number of test cases are always bigger than what they are. And then architecturally also, you have to set it up in a way that they can be run in a shorter amount of time. And I think Madhu, you and Jake both talk about this to me, where you gotta be able to run it in a short amount of time. So that is an important part. Make sure that you can do that. All right. Any other questions, Neil, Jenny? And I know we have 1 minute, 2 minutes left.
Yeah. So another question we got was from Karanveer, which is how are organizations successfully balancing the use of AI powered testing tools with the traditional automation frameworks that are out there today?
Yeah, right now they're advancing the pace of automation and also manual testing. So like early days when NASA sent people on moon, they were still verifying the calculations by computer and verifying it done with calculator because they didn't trust it. So as the trust increases in the AI powered testing tool, that will take up more and more space into automation and manual testing. But until that's there, we have to rely on the traditional automation frameworks. We have to continue using them until we have successfully migrated to the AI powered. So do not stop using AI powered testing tools. Continue using them. Continue helping your team in accelerating the pace of testing. But at the same time, continue using your traditional automation tool until there's full trust.
Excellent. Madhu, thank you. Jake is not here, but I'll thank Jake separately. And this was a great session. I hope the people there enjoyed it and learned something new. We will put this on YouTube. If you have any questions, or reach out to Madhu or Jake, email me and I'll connect you to guys. Thank you, everybody. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Thank you, Rajiv.
Bye.
Thank you.